I stared at the bank statement, my hands shaking. The numbers blurred before my eyes, but one figure stood out like a neon sign: $3,000. A withdrawal I knew nothing about. Nick! I called out, my voice echoing through our small apartment. Can you come here for a second? My husband's heavy footsteps approached. He appeared in the doorway, a guilty look already spreading across his face. What's up, Laura? I held up the statement. Care to explain this? Nick's eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. Oh, that. It's nothing really. Just a small investment. Investment? I scoffed. Nick, we can't afford to lose $3,000 on some investment. What were you thinking? He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd grown to recognize all too well. Look, I know it seems bad, but I've got a system. I'll win it back, I promise. My stomach dropped. Win it back? Are you gambling again? Nick's silence was all the confirmation I needed. I felt the floor shift beneath me, my world tilting on its axis. We talked about this, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. After last time, you promised Dash. I know what I promised. Nick snapped. But things are different now. I've got it under control. I laughed bitterly. Under control? $3,000 is not under control, Nick. That's our rent money. It was a one-time thing, he insisted, but I could see the lie in his eyes. Just trust me, okay? Trust. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of broken promises and shattered dreams. I thought of all the times I'd given him the benefit of the doubt, all the second chances I'd offered. I can't do this anymore, I whispered, more to myself than to him. Nick's face paled. What are you saying? I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing my husband's face. I'm saying we need to have a serious talk about our future. Because right now, I'm not sure we have one. As Nick stammered out excuses and promises, I tuned him out. My mind was already racing, calculating our meager savings and wondering how I'd make ends meet. One thing was clear: things couldn't go on like this. Something had to change, and fast. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a storm that would upend my entire life. I was still reeling from Nick's gambling revelation when the doorbell rang. My stomach dropped as I opened the door to find Wendy and Tom, Nick's parents, standing there with suitcases in hand. Surprise! Wendy chirped, pushing past me into the apartment. We thought we'd drop by for a little visit. I forced a smile, my mind racing. How unexpected. How long were you planning to stay? Tom shrugged, following his wife inside. Oh, you know Wendy. She likes to keep things spontaneous. I bit back a retort. Spontaneous was one word for it. Invasive was another. As I helped them settle in, Wendy's critical gaze swept over our living room. This place is a mess, Laura. Don't you know how to keep a home? I bristled. I work full-time, Wendy. It's not easy to dash. A real wife would manage both, she interrupted, her tone dripping with disapproval. I clenched my fists, fighting to keep my composure. Well, I'm doing my best. Nick chose that moment to emerge from the bedroom, his face lighting up at the sight of his parents. Mom, Dad, what a great surprise. I watched as he embraced them, feeling more isolated than ever. How could he be so happy to see them after our fight? Did our problems mean nothing to him? As the day wore on, Wendy's criticisms piled up. My cooking wasn't up to her standards. The bathroom needed a deep clean. Even the way I folded laundry was wrong. By evening, I was at my breaking point. I retreated to the kitchen, desperately needing a moment alone. Nick followed me in. Hey, he said softly. I know my mom can be a bit much, but she means well. I whirled on him. Means well? Nick, she's been insulting me all day. And you've just stood there, saying nothing. He held up his hands defensively. Come on, Laura. That's just how she is. You're being too sensitive. Too sensitive? I hissed, mindful of the thin walls. Your mother barges into our home, criticizes everything I do, and I'm too sensitive? Nick's face hardened. They're family, Laura. You need to make an effort. I stared at him, feeling a chasm opening between us. And what about me, Nick? Aren't I your family too? Before he could answer, Wendy's voice called from the living room. Nicholas, come help your father with the TV, dear. Laura clearly doesn't know how to set it up properly. Nick gave me an apologetic look before hurrying out to help his parents. I leaned against the counter, a realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about Nick's gambling or his parents' visit. This was about my place in this family, or lack thereof. As I listened to their laughter from the other room, I felt more alone than ever. Something had to change, and soon. But as I stood there, trapped in my own home, I had no idea how to even begin. The first of the month arrived, and with it, the dreaded rent check. I sat at our tiny kitchen table, staring at our near-empty bank account on my laptop screen. Nick was supposed to transfer his half of the rent yesterday, but the money was nowhere to be seen. Nick! I called out, my voice tight with frustration. Where's your part of the rent? He sauntered into the kitchen, looking annoyingly carefree. Oh, yeah. About that. I'm a little short this month. Can you cover me? I slammed the laptop shut. Cover you? Nick, we talked about this. You promised after last time, Dash. I know, he interrupted, holding up his hands. But things have been tight, and I had some unexpected expenses. Unexpected expenses? I echoed, my voice rising. You mean more gambling? Nick's face darkened. Don't start with that again, Laura. I told you, I've got it under control. Under control? I laughed bitterly. We can't keep doing this, Nick. You're gambling our future away. Stop acting like my mother, he snapped. I can handle this. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. It's not about handling it. It's about being responsible. We're supposed to be partners, Nick. How can I trust you when you keep doing this? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. You want to talk about trust? How about trusting me to figure this out? I don't need you nagging me every 5 minutes. Nagging? I felt like I'd been slapped. Is that what you think this is? I'm trying to keep us afloat while you throw our money away. Nick's retort was cut off by Wendy's voice from the living room. Is everything all right in there? Nicholas, dear, why don't you come help me with something? I watched as Nick's shoulders sagged with relief at the interruption. Without another word, he turned and left the kitchen, leaving me alone with our financial mess and my growing doubts. As I listened to Nick and Wendy's muffled voices in the other room, a cold realization settled in my gut. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, trust, and the future I thought we were building together. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, my fingers hovering over the transfer button. Once again, I would have to bail us out, dipping into my dwindling savings to keep a roof over our heads. But as I prepared to make the transfer, a new thought struck me. How long could I keep doing this? How many more times would I have to sacrifice my own security for Nick's irresponsibility? For the first time, I allowed myself to seriously consider a question I'd been avoiding for months. Was this marriage worth saving? The answer, I realized with a mix of sadness and resolve, was becoming clearer by the day.
I trudged up the stairs to our apartment, exhausted after a long day at work. All I wanted was a quiet evening to myself, maybe a hot bath and a glass of wine. But as I opened the door, I froze in disbelief. The living room was filled with boxes and suitcases. Wendy bustled about, directing Tom as he rearranged our furniture. Nick stood in the middle of it all, looking sheepish. "What is all this?" I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why are your parents here?" Nick approached me cautiously. "They need help, Laura. We have the space. It's temporary." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Temporary or not, you should have asked me. "This is my home too, Nick," Wendy chimed in, her voice sickly sweet. "Oh, Laura, dear. We didn't want to bother you at work. Besides, family helps family. You understand, don't you?" I looked from Wendy's smug face to Nick's pleading eyes, feeling cornered. This was more than just an extended visit. They were moving in. "How long?" I asked, my voice tight. Nick shuffled his feet. "Just until they get back on their feet. Dad lost his job and you didn't think to discuss this with me first?" I interrupted, my anger rising. I knew you'd understand, Nick said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Understand? You've completely disregarded my feelings, my space, my autonomy in my own home. Wendy said. Now, Laura, don't be dramatic. We're family. This is what families do. I turned to her, my patience snapping. No, Wendy. This is what your family does. You bulldoze over everyone else's boundaries and expect them to just fall in line. The room fell silent. Nick looked stricken, torn between his wife and his parents. Tom busied himself with a box, clearly uncomfortable. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. Nick, we need to talk. Privately. As I led him to our bedroom, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired, angry, and most of all, defeated. In that moment, I realized something had to give. I closed the bedroom door behind us, my mind racing. This wasn't just about his parents moving in. It was about respect, partnership, and the life we'd promised to build together. As I turned to face Nick, I knew the conversation we were about to have would change everything. The question was, were we strong enough to weather this storm, or was this the beginning of the end? I stared at my credit card statement in disbelief, my hands shaking with rage. There it was, plain as day, a $500 charge at a high-end department store I'd never set foot in. My blood boiled as I realized what had happened. Storming into the living room, I found Wendy lounging on the couch, flipping through a magazine. She looked up, her face a mask of innocence. Wendy, did you use my credit card? I demanded, my voice trembling. She blinked, then smiled. Oh, that. I needed a few things, and I knew you wouldn't mind. We're family, after all. I felt like I'd been slapped. This is theft. You had no right to use my card without asking. Nick rushed in, alerted by the commotion. What's going on? I turned to him, desperate for support. Your mother used my credit card without permission. She spent $500. Nick's face fell, but to my horror, he didn't look angry. He looked resigned. Laura, I'm sure she didn't mean any harm. Let's not blow this out of proportion. Wendy nodded, her voice sickly sweet. Exactly. Your family. What's yours is ours. Don't be so selfish, dear. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Selfish? This is my hard-earned money. Nick, how can you just stand there and let this happen? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Let it go, Laura. It's not that big of a deal. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I looked from Nick to Wendy, seeing them clearly for the first time. They were two sides of the same coin, both willing to take advantage of me, to disrespect my boundaries and dismiss my feelings. Not a big deal? I whispered, my voice dangerously low. This is the last straw. I can't live like this anymore. Nick's eyes widened as he realized the gravity of the situation. Laura, wait. We can work this out. But I was already moving, grabbing my purse and keys. No, Nick. We can't. I need some time to think. As I walked out the door, I heard Wendy's voice behind me. She'll be back. Where else would she go? Her words followed me down the stairs, cementing my resolve. I pulled out my phone and dialed Samantha's number with shaking fingers. Sam? It's me. I need your help. I can't go back there. As I drove away from the apartment, tears streaming down my face, I knew one thing for certain. My life would never be the same again. Question was, did I have the strength to build a new one? I sat across from Samantha in her cozy living room, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. The warmth seeped into my fingers, but it did little to thaw the icy dread in my chest. You deserve better, Laura, Samantha said, her voice gentle but firm. It's time to think about yourself. I nodded, fighting back tears. I know. I don't know where to start. Samantha leaned forward, her eyes filled with determination. Start by finding a safe place. We'll figure out the rest together. Over the next few hours, we crafted a plan. Samantha helped me set up a separate bank account and offered her spare room until I could find my own place. As we scrolled through apartment listings, the reality of what I was doing hit me like a tidal wave. Am I really doing this? I whispered, my voice shaking. Leaving my marriage? Samantha squeezed my hand. You're reclaiming your life, Laura. It's not going to be easy, but you're strong enough to do this. Where are you? You can't just walk out like this. Baby, please come home. We can work this out. You're being selfish. Think about what this is doing to my parents. Each message twisted the knife in my heart, but they also strengthened my resolve. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. The next day, I called in sick to work and focused on my escape plan. I found a small studio apartment within my budget and signed a month-to-month lease. As I filled out the paperwork, my hand trembled, but I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. That afternoon, I steeled myself for the hardest part, returning to the apartment to collect my things. Samantha insisted on coming with me for support. As we pulled up to the building, I saw Nick's car in the parking lot. My heart raced, and for a moment I considered turning back. You can do this, Samantha reassured me. I'm right here with you. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car. With each step towards the apartment, I felt my old life falling away and a new, uncertain future taking shape. I had no idea what awaited me behind that door, but I knew one thing for certain: there was no going back. Whatever happened next would define the rest of my life. As I raised my hand to knock, I silently prayed for the strength to face whatever came next. My hand trembled as I turned the key in the lock. Samantha stood beside me, a reassuring presence as we entered the apartment. The air felt thick with tension. Nick's voice cut through the silence. Laura? Is that you? He appeared in the hallway, his eyes widening at the sight of Samantha and the empty boxes we carried. Wendy emerged from the kitchen, her face a mask of disapproval. What's going on here? Nick demanded, his voice a mix of anger and panic. I took a deep breath. I'm moving out, Nick. I can't do this anymore. Wendy gasped dramatically. You can't just leave. This is your family.
Her words ignited a fire within me. No, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. My idea of family doesn't involve betrayal and disrespect. Nick stepped closer, his hands outstretched. You're overreacting. We can work this out. I shook my head, fighting back tears. I've tried, Nick, but it's over. As Samantha and I moved through the apartment, packing my belongings, Nick and Wendy followed, their protests growing more desperate. Think about what you're throwing away, Wendy pleaded. All the years you've built together. I paused, holding a framed photo of Nick and me from happier times. I'm not throwing anything away, Wendy. I'm saving myself. Nick's face crumpled. Laura, please. I'll change. I'll go to counseling, I'll stop gambling. Just don't leave. For a moment, I wavered. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayals, the constant undermining of my worth. I set the photo down. It's too late, Nick. You had your chances. As we carried the last box out, Wendy made a final attempt. If you walk out that door, don't even think about coming back. I turned to face them one last time. Nick looked broken, Wendy furious, and I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. I won't be coming back, I said softly. Goodbye. The door closed behind us with a final click. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, my legs weak. Samantha squeezed my hand. You did it, Laura. You're free. As we drove away, I watched the apartment building shrink in the rearview mirror. Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to choose. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I was finally taking control of my own story. 6 months after walking out of Nick's life, I stood in front of the mirror in my small studio apartment, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Gone were the dark circles under my eyes and the constant look of worry. In their place was a spark of confidence I hadn't seen in years. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Paul, my colleague turned friend, standing there with a warm smile. "Ready for dinner?" he asked. I nodded, grabbing my purse. As we walked to the restaurant, Paul's hand brushed mine, sending a flutter through my stomach. We'd been taking things slow, both of us aware of my need to heal. Over dinner, Paul listened intently as I shared my latest accomplishment, a promotion at work. "I'm so proud of you, Laura," he said, his eyes shining with genuine admiration. "You've come so far." I felt a lump form in my throat. Sometimes I can hardly believe it myself. Paul reached across the table, gently taking my hand. "Take your time, Laura. We'll go at your pace." His words, so different from the demands and expectations I'd grown used to, brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. For the first time in years, I feel free and happy. As we walked back to my apartment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road hadn't been easy. There had been nights of doubt, tearful phone calls with Samantha, and moments when I'd almost given in to Nick's pleas to return. But with each day, I grew stronger. Standing at my door, Paul leaned in, his lips brushing my cheek. "Good night, Laura. I'll call you tomorrow." I watched him walk away, my heart light. Entering my apartment, I was struck by the quiet, not the oppressive silence of my old life, but a peaceful calm that spoke of possibilities. I picked up a framed photo on my desk, a snapshot of Samantha and me at the beach, both of us laughing. Next to it stood a small potted plant, a gift from Paul. These simple objects represented my new life, friendship, growth, and the promise of love built on mutual respect. As I got ready for bed, I thought about how far I'd come. I'd left behind a toxic marriage, stood up to manipulative in-laws, and reclaimed my sense of self. The journey had been painful, but necessary. Lying in bed, I smiled to myself. For the first time in years, I was excited about the future. I didn't know exactly what it held, but I knew one thing for certain. It was mine to shape on my own terms. I closed my eyes, feeling truly at peace. Tomorrow was a new day, full of promise, and I was finally ready to embrace it.